Construction worker Jake Morrison was just trying to install new heating pipes beneath St. Matthew's Cathedral when his sledgehammer broke through what should have been solid foundation. Instead, he found himself staring into a hidden chamber that had been sealed for decades. The musty air that escaped carried with it the faint scent of something that made Jake's blood run cold. And when he shined his flashlight into the darkness, he saw 12 small white choir robes carefully arranged on stone pedestals like shrine offerings. It was December 2001, exactly 18 years after 12 young choir members had vanished during Christmas Eve service, and Jake Morrison had just uncovered the most horrifying secret in the town's history, a secret that would expose the monster who had been hiding behind a collar and the trust of an entire community. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this powerful story of courage, betrayal, and forgotten heroism, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. Now, let's uncover the dark truth behind one of America's most shocking Christmas tragedies. The snow fell gently on Millbrook, Connecticut, as December 24, 1983 settled into evening. St. Matthew's Cathedral stood like a beacon against the winter darkness, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven while warm light spilled from stained glass windows onto the peaceful streets below. Inside, 12 young voices prepared for what should have been the most beautiful Christmas Eve service in the church's 89-year history. Sister Catherine Murphy, the 45-year-old choir director, gathered her 12 singers in the small rehearsal room adjacent to the main sanctuary. The children, ranging in age from 8 to 16, represented some of Millbrook's most devout families. Each had been carefully selected not only for their vocal abilities, but for their character and dedication to the church. "Remember, children," Sister Catherine said softly, adjusting young Timothy Walsh's bow tie. "Tonight we sing for the Christ child. Let your voices be pure instruments of God's love." The choir members stood in their pristine white robes, each embroidered with golden crosses that caught the candlelight. Emma Sullivan, 10, clutched her sheet music nervously. Michael Rodriguez, 14, the choir's lead soprano despite his age, whispered encouragement to the younger children. Sarah Bennett, 8, the youngest member, held tightly to her older sister Rebecca's hand. At 11:15 p.m., the children filed into the choir loft above the main sanctuary. The cathedral was filling with families arriving for midnight mass. Parents waved up at their children, cameras flashed, and the atmosphere buzzed with Christmas joy. Father Daniel Harrison, the beloved 52-year-old pastor who had served St. Matthew's for 15 years, nodded approvingly at the choir. "They look like angels," he whispered to Sister Catherine. None of the 847 people in attendance that night could have imagined that within 30 minutes, those 12 angels would vanish without a trace, beginning one of Connecticut's most haunting mysteries. Margaret Sullivan positioned herself in the third pew, where she had the perfect view of her daughter Emma in the choir loft. Around her, other proud parents settled in for what they expected to be a magical Christmas Eve service. The church had been decorated with white poinsettias and evergreen garlands, creating an atmosphere of pure serenity. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Father Harrison approached the pulpit to begin the service. As was tradition, he looked up at the choir loft and nodded for the children to begin their opening hymn, "O come, all ye faithful." Silence. Father Harrison waited, then nodded again, more firmly this time. Still nothing. A murmur of confusion rippled through the congregation as people began turning in their seats to look up at the choir loft. The loft was empty. 12 white choir robes lay scattered across the wooden floor like fallen snow. Sheet music fluttered in the winter breeze coming through a window that should have been closed. The children were gone. "Perhaps they've gone to prepare for a special entrance," Father Harrison announced, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "Let us begin with our opening prayer while we wait for our young angels to return." But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. Parents began standing, craning their necks to see into the loft. Margaret Sullivan felt her heart racing as she realized her daughter was nowhere to be seen. "Emma!" she called out, her voice echoing in the vast cathedral. "Emma!" Other parents joined in, calling their children's names. The peaceful Christmas Eve service descended into chaos as families pushed toward the narrow spiral staircase leading to the choir loft. Father Harrison tried to maintain order, but panic was spreading through the congregation like wildfire. When the first parents reached the loft, they found it completely empty except for the abandoned robes and an open window that led to a steep snow-covered roof 40 feet above the ground. But there were no footprints in the snow, no rope, no ladder, no explanation for how 12 children could have vanished from a locked room with only one entrance. Police Chief Robert McManus had been enjoying a quiet Christmas Eve with his family when the call came in at 12:23 a.m. A veteran of 23 years in law enforcement, he had dealt with missing children cases before, but never anything like this. 12 kids, Bob," Deputy Sheriff Karen Walsh said as McManus arrived at the cathedral. "All gone at the same time, no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no trace." McManus surveyed the scene with growing unease. The choir loft was accessible only through a single spiral staircase that opened directly into the main sanctuary. During the service, that sanctuary had been packed with nearly 850 people. For someone to abduct 12 children, they would have had to somehow get them past all those witnesses. "What about the window?" McManus asked, examining the opening that led to the roof. 40-foot drop, and look. Deputy Walsh pointed to the pristine snow on the roof and ground below. Not a single footprint, no disturbance at all. The physical evidence made no sense. The children's robes had been carefully placed on the floor, not torn off in a struggle. Their sheet music was scattered but not destroyed. Personal items, glasses, a retainer, a small cross necklace, remained in the loft. Most disturbing of all, several parents reported that their children had seemed nervous and withdrawn in the days leading up to Christmas Eve. Emma Sullivan had told her mother she was scared of the special practice. Michael Rodriguez had asked his father if he could quit the choir. Sarah Bennett had been having nightmares about the man in the basement, but when pressed for details, the children had clammed up, as if they had been warned not to talk. The investigation that followed consumed the small town of Millbrook. FBI agents arrived within hours, setting up a command center in the church basement. Search dogs combed every inch of the cathedral and the surrounding grounds. Divers searched the nearby Millbrook River despite the fact it was frozen solid. Father Harrison cooperated fully with investigators, providing access to all church records and facilities. His alibi was ironclad. He had been in full view of the congregation from 11:30 p.m. until the discovery of the missing children. Sister Catherine was found in a state of near collapse in her convent room. She claimed to have no memory of the final hour before the service, saying only that she had given the children their final instructions and assumed they had gone to the loft as planned. The groundskeeper, Thomas Brennan, a quiet 58-year-old man who had worked at St. Matthew's for over a decade, was questioned extensively. Several parents remembered their children mentioning Mr. Tom in the weeks before their disappearance, but Brennan insisted he had only routine interactions with the choir members. As days turned to weeks, the investigation stalled. No ransom demands were made, no bodies were found, no credible witnesses came forward. The 12 children had simply vanished as if they had never existed. Theories abounded. Some suggested a satanic cult had targeted the children for a Christmas Eve ritual. Others believed they had been abducted by a human trafficking ring. A few whispered that the children had somehow fallen through a hidden passage in the old cathedral and were trapped somewhere beneath the building. But as weeks turned to months, hope faded. The families were left with an incomprehensible loss, and a town was forever changed by the inexplicable tragedy that had occurred on the holiest night of the year. For 18 years, Millbrook lived under the shadow of the Christmas Eve disappearance. The town's population dwindled as families moved away, unable to bear the constant reminders of the tragedy. St. Matthew's Cathedral struggled to maintain its congregation, and by 2000, the aging building was in desperate need of renovation. Father Harrison had aged dramatically in the years following the disappearance. The once vibrant pastor had become withdrawn and haunted. though he continued to serve his dwindling flock with quiet dedication. He announced his retirement in 2001, saying only that he wanted to rest and pray in his final years. The new pastor, Father Michael O'Brien, inherited a church in crisis. The heating system was failing, the foundation was cracking, and the building's infrastructure desperately needed updating. In December 2001, he hired Morrison Construction to begin extensive renovations. Jake Morrison, a 34-year-old construction worker and father of two, had lived in Millbrook his entire life. He remembered the Christmas Eve disappearance clearly. He'd been 16 at the time and had attended the service with his family. Like everyone in town, he had theories about what happened to the 12 children, but he never imagined he would be the one to uncover the truth. On December 15, 2001, Jake was working alone in the cathedral basement, installing new heating pipes along the foundation wall. The work was routine. Break through the old concrete, run the pipes, and seal everything back up. But when his sledgehammer struck the wall near the altar's foundation, instead of the solid thud he expected, he heard a hollow echo. Curious, Jake struck the wall again. Same sound. He chipped away more concrete and realized there was a void behind the foundation wall, a void that wasn't supposed to exist. Using a flashlight, Jake peered through the small hole he had created. What he saw made his blood freeze in his veins. "Father O'Brien!" Jake's voice echoed through the empty cathedral as he ran up from the basement, his face pale with shock. "Father, you need to call the police. Right now." Father O'Brien, who had been reviewing renovation plans in his office, looked up in alarm. "Jake, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I found something in the basement, behind the wall." Jake's hands shook as he tried to explain. "There's a room down there, a hidden room. And Father, there are choir robes, 12 of them." Within an hour, the cathedral was surrounded by police cars and emergency vehicles. Chief McManus, now in his final year before retirement, stood at the entrance to the hidden chamber with a mixture of vindication and horror. The secret room was small but carefully constructed, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the cathedral's altar. Stone pedestals lined the walls, each holding a small white choir robe, perfectly preserved in the cool, dry air. The robes were arranged like shrine offerings, each positioned with ritualistic precision. But the robes were not the most disturbing discovery. On a stone altar in the center of the room lay 12 small crosses, each engraved with a name and date. Emma Sullivan, December 24th, 1983. Michael Rodriguez, December 24th, 1983. All 12 missing children were represented, and carved into the stone wall above the altar in elegant script was a chilling inscription. These pure souls were delivered unto the Lord on his holy night, freed from the corruption of this world. D.H. Father Daniel Harrison. The investigation that followed revealed the horrifying truth about the beloved pastor who had fooled an entire community for over 30 years. Father Harrison's personal quarters were searched, revealing a secret journal that documented his twisted beliefs about purifying children before they could be corrupted by the world. Harrison believed that children who died in a state of perfect innocence would become angels immediately, sparing them the trials and temptations of adult life. In his diseased mind, he was performing acts of mercy, not murder. The journal detailed months of planning for the Christmas Eve ritual. Harrison had spent weeks convincing the children that they were part of a special Christmas surprise that required them to meet him in the basement before the service. He had drugged their pre-service cookies with sedatives, making them docile and compliant. One by one, he had led them to the hidden chamber he had constructed over several months, using his knowledge of the cathedral's architecture and his position of absolute trust. The children, already drowsy from the drugs, offered no resistance as he delivered them unto the Lord. Their bodies had been sealed behind the false wall, along with their choir robes, arranged as a twisted shrine to Harrison's demented vision of salvation. The most chilling discovery was Harrison's final journal entry, dated December 25th, 1983. The work is complete. 12 angels now sing in God's choir, their voices pure for eternity. No one suspects. The grieving families take comfort in my words, never knowing their children are closer to God than they could ever imagine. Father Daniel Harrison was arrested at his retirement home in Florida, where he had been living quietly on his church pension. Now 70 years old, he showed no remorse for his crimes, insisting to the end that he had performed acts of divine mercy. "Those children are in paradise," he told investigators during his confession. "I saved them from lives of sin and suffering. Their parents should thank me." Harrison died in prison in 2003 before his case could go to trial. He never revealed the exact location of the children's remains, taking that final cruelty to his grave. The hidden chamber beneath St. Matthew's Cathedral was sealed permanently after the investigation concluded. The 12 choir robes were returned to the families for burial in a special service attended by hundreds of mourners who had waited 18 years for closure. Margaret Sullivan, now 58, spoke for all the families at the memorial service. "We always knew Emma was an angel. We just never imagined someone would murder her to make her one." St. Matthew's Cathedral closed permanently in 2002. The building was deemed too associated with tragedy to continue as a house of worship. Today, it stands empty, a Gothic monument to the dangers of blind faith and unchecked authority. Jake Morrison, the construction worker who uncovered the truth, struggled with guilt and trauma for years after his discovery. He eventually became an advocate for child safety in religious organizations, working to ensure that no community would ever again place absolute trust in a single authority figure. The 12 families found some measure of peace in finally knowing what happened to their children, though the pain of their loss never fully healed. Several families established a foundation dedicated to protecting children from predators who hide behind religious authority. The case became a landmark in criminal psychology, studied as an example of how charismatic predators can use positions of trust to commit unthinkable crimes. It led to new protocols in churches nationwide, requiring background checks and never allowing adult leaders to be alone with children. Chief McManus retired shortly after solving the case that had haunted him for 18 years. He often said that the Christmas Eve disappearance taught him that evil could hide behind the most trusted faces, wearing the most sacred robes. "Harrison fooled us all," McManus reflected in his final interview. He performed their funerals, comforted their families, and led prayers for their safe return, all while knowing he was the one who had taken them. That level of deception, it changes how you see the world. The 12 young voices that were silenced on Christmas Eve, 1983, serve as a reminder that monsters often hide in plain sight, protected by our own unwillingness to suspect those we've been taught to trust. Their memory lives on not just in the pain of their families, but in the vigilance their tragedy has inspired to protect other children from similar fates. Emma Sullivan, Michael Rodriguez, Sarah Bennett, Rebecca Bennett, Timothy Walsh, Jennifer Murphy, David Kowalski, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, Anthony Romano, Rachel Green, Matthew Johnson. 12 names, 12 lives, 12 angels who deserve to grow up, make mistakes, find love, and live full lives before meeting their Maker. Instead, they became victims of a madman's twisted vision of salvation, murdered by the very person their families trusted most. Their story reminds us that the greatest betrayals often come from those closest to us, and that sometimes the most sacred places can hide the darkest secrets. In their memory, we must never stop asking questions, never stop demanding accountability, and never assume that a collar, a title, or a position of respect makes someone worthy of our absolute trust. The truth took 18 years to emerge from beneath St. Matthew's Cathedral, but it finally set 12 young souls free from the lies that had buried them. In death, they became the teachers they never had the chance to become in life, showing us that vigilance is the price of protecting innocence, and that sometimes the most important investigations begin with the courage to break through walls that were never meant to be broken.